Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
Who are we talking about today?
Today, we will discuss Paul Rowles.
Hey, that sounds like my guy from last week.
Well, I'm not going to lie, when you did yours, that I was a little concerned when you told me his name, but I just thought you said your letter's different than me, and we picked the same person.
I thought I said my letter's different.
Well, you like to say things with a weird twang sometimes.
I sure do.
So I was just like, we picked the same fucker? Well, son of a bitch. But I am pleased to report that we did not, and this is just another son of a bitch Paul.
All right.
Now, his crimes will occur in your favorite time, the 70s, and in Florida.
Yay. Oh, gosh.
Now, Paul was born April 28th, 1948, in Pennsylvania. He will grow up in a dysfunctional home with a violent alcoholic and abusive father and a mentally ill mother.
You like those cases, huh?
I know, I can tell you every time I run into one, and it's just like, well, shit. Some commonalities, yeah, with all the other murderers. Pacing as a trash.
Sure are. Which, by the way, you have me totally paying attention to the kind of cases that have been pinging to my phone.
You seem to like incestuous ones.
And dismemberment.
Makes me curious what your Amazon ads look like.
And it's funny because we get a lot of the same ads, and you know that, so screw you.
So Paul's dad would even at times threaten to kill both Paul and his mother. So just to get you an idea of how toxic this household was.
You like those cases.
Again, it's like the breeding ground for criminal behaviors. So it's not surprising that this environment won't be any different from all the others that we've learned about, will create the monster Paul is. Now, by 8, Paul will start...
8? That's still a baby.
8, he will start being cruel to animals. I tried real hard to figure out what all that entailed, whether he, was smushing frogs or killed their family cat. But I couldn't find anything more than at 8 is when he started to mistreat animals.
Poor kid.
But by the time he's 12, he starts having violent rape fantasies involving women. Thought it was weird that had to be specified, but whatever. Now, when he becomes a teen, he starts stealing panties off clotheslines and even commits burglaries in order to fulfill his panty snatching desires.
All right.
But I was like, okay. Now, are you wondering yet what he's doing with his coveted panty collection?
I assume he's using it to beat off in.
Well, if you guessed prancing around his room in them, you'd be right.
Oh, jeez.
No, he would also use them as masturbatory tools, which isn't surprising.
Oh, that's what I just done said.
I know, that's why, but I thought it was a funnier one that I'm curious if anybody walked in when he's wearing somebody's panties. And are we talking he's plucking off his senior citizen neighbor's undies off the line and he's just wearing these tent undies on him? I don't know.
That's disgusting.
But I guess at some point his parents are just like, we've had enough of the panty snatching and the burglaries, and he's kicked out at the age of 18. Now, Paul does grow into a handsome young man. He does attempt to go into the military, but was kept from that due to his asthma, so he decides to try to pursue college. That brings us to 1969. He will meet a young, attractive blonde named Linda Schaefer. He ends up hopping into the back seat of her friend's car one afternoon. I guess they were at a stoplight or whatever, which I was like, only in the 60s and 70s would this shit be okay. He hops in the back seat with her and her friend in the car while they're driving downtown, which the area they were in was a typical spot for local college students to hang out. When he hops into the back of that car, but at this point he's a lean, young, blonde guy with tousled surfer look about him. But again, I
Okay.
would say I don't care what you look like. Somebody jumps in the back seat of my car. It wouldn't be like, hey, you want my phone number? Again,
Well, but I
60s
thought
and
you just said
70s, fucking weird.
but I thought you said that he knew them.
No, he meets her. That's how he meets her. He
Oh,
jumps in the
shit.
back seat of Linda's friend's car while they're driving downtown. Now, the area they were in was a usual hangout for local college students, but he just hops in the seat or in the back seat because he thought she was pretty. So he jumps in the car and, puts his moves on her with a hey.
Yeah, so no.
That's what I was just like, no. And so he was attracted to her, which is why he jumped in, and his boldness had mesmerized her, so she did give him her phone number, and things got serious pretty quick. It didn't take long before he proposed, and she said yes. I assume it wasn't all in the same day. That was a
You never
joke,
know.
Andrea. Now, she agrees, obviously, to marry him, and they move to Miami in the Robin Hood Apartments. That's where Paul starts college. Now, in that same apartment live another newlywed couple that live there, Joseph and Linda Fida. Now, Joseph was also a student of the University of Miami's ROTC program and was training to be a Navy pilot after graduation. He would also sell real estate at night, while Linda would work during the day as a secretary. Now, soon, Paul developed a fixation with 20-year-old Linda. Now, don't get that confused with his wife, Linda. These are two different Lindas. You got that?
I got it.
Now, Linda was a former beauty pageant contestant, so he's just obsessed with eyeballing her, I guess. Now, March
How old is he?
31st, he's 20. 20.
Young. Probably shouldn't have gotten married if his
24.
eyes were still wandering.
24.
Probably shouldn't be. I stand by it still. He shouldn't have gotten married if his eyeballs were still wandering.
Well, he lives next door to a former beauty pageant contestant, so I don't know what feller wouldn't let his eyeballs wander, but how far they wander is the issue here. Now, on March 31st, 1972, Joseph comes home to find his wife Linda submerged in the bathtub, strangled, and with several stab wounds to her breast. Now, 2 Band-Aids are discovered at the scene. One Band-Aid would have a clear imprint of a big toe and blood in it and was found, outside the bathroom. The other Band-Aid was recovered under Linda's body in the tub that had come from a finger.
Yeah.
Those are, the 2 bits of evidence that they did have. Now, the first night of the investigation didn't lead to much progress because no one had seen or heard anything. Now, the next night, a frantic neighbor called a fellow neighbor who was also an assistant state attorney, and she was talking to him and was saying that she heard someone in the Fida's apartment above her, and no one's supposed to be there, right? So she told him that, she could clearly hear somebody and was panicked thinking the killer had returned, which I thought was stupid because if the apartment's empty, what did he return to do? You're downstairs.
The killer returned to collect his Band-Aids.
But regardless, this neighbor, James Woodard, hurried to the apartment where he found the police escorting the husband who was collecting items for the funeral home for Linda, which was that's so sad.
It's very sad.
But so naturally, once the mystery is solved, James goes to the concerned neighbor to let her know that all's well. It was just the husband returning to collect some of her things. Since during all that time, the neighbor had panicked and also phoned one of her other neighbor friends to let them know. She's basically the busybody of the neighborhood is what I pictured. Yeah. But
she's got nothing better to do with her time. She's just like, I done heard footsteps.
And everybody's like, there's nothing on TV. We're going to come on over and see if we can hear through the ceiling.
They're standing on chairs with their ears up at a vent, up in the ceiling. I think I hear something. No, it's just AC done kicked down.
I totally thought of it like that Friends episode when they go downstairs and you can hear Phoebe upstairs and they start banging on the ceiling from underneath. Is what I pictured, because when James goes downstairs to tell the concerned neighbor that all is well, he finds her with other neighbors, Paul Rowles and his wife Linda, that they had come over to wait with her while they waited to hear what happened. Now, when James walks in, he can't help but notice that Paul has Band-Aids on both of his big toes. So
he stubs them a lot. Why is he barefoot in a neighbor's house?
So,
because in order for the neighbor to see the Band-Aids on his feet.
So what I figured is just like when he was described when he jumped into the back of that car earlier on, that I pictured, since he was described as a surfer dude, I pictured sandals. So that's why I figure everybody was always seeing his toes. Although I thought it was super weird because who plays tennis in sandals? Maybe if he put real shoes on, he wouldn't be scuffing up his tootsies.
Well, I guess at least he's got it in his favor that he's not one of those men that wear socks pulled up halfway up their calves with sandals on.
No, instead, he's the neighbor dude that apparently loses his Band-Aids all over everywhere.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. He probably had a community pool. The poor pool boy was like just fishing him out all the time, just like, some bitch.
They were like, "Aw, man, was Paul here? The filter's clogged again."
You know, his wife was probably like finding him in her hair in the morning, just like, just put on real shoes. And he's probably all hippie-like of, he doesn't like to have his toes restrained. They need to be free and individual. You know what? Turns out he would have loved the shit out of those toe shoes.
Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe not, because it contains each individual toe. So
does a Band-Aid, sorta. He could have cut the toes off of those shoes then.
It's weird.
So James calls the police and lets them know that he's pretty sure they've got their guy, because I feel like he's in the area. He's wearing Band-Aids on his toes. They happen to find Band-Aids at the scene.
It would mean that he was in the house barefoot.
Well, so that was one thing, is that the toe impression was Linda's blood. So there was Linda's blood on that big toe Band-Aid that was off in another part of the house. And then the one that came off of a finger was underneath Linda's body. So that's why these two Band-Aids are important. Now, the police will talk to several neighbors who recall a resident who liked to wear Band-Aids on his toes to avoid blisters while he played tennis. Now, everybody who mentioned which neighbor it was, it came up to, it was Paul. So Paul was questioned, as were other neighbors, and he claimed that he washed his car before going to a party that night. Now, his wife was a stewardess and happened to be away that night on a flight, so nobody really can say what Paul was doing that night. Now, the police were able to do some sort of a ruse and I don't know what the hell they did to get this, but they got his toe print. What ruse? I can't even come up with a ruse to get somebody's toe print. But I was like,
they secretly put a piece of glass somewhere and had him step down, and then they were like, "Sweet."
Yeah, I don't know what the ruse was, but they did it. They got a toe print. They matched it to the Band-Aid impression thing, the little pattern that they had in there. And Paul was arrested after that match was to the Band-Aid. Now, they naturally arrest Paul, and when they begin questioning him, he quickly confessed in less than an hour that he did murder Linda. Again, not his wife, but the neighbor. But he pleads he's innocent by reasons of insanity.
Because she's just too darn beautiful for him to be able to think straight.
Yeah, unfortunately for him, he was found to be sane since he knew what he was doing was wrong. And also,
I don't think people understand how that works.
I know. So he would claim that he really just wanted to rape her and not murder her.
Sorry, it's not funny.
It's not, because it's one of those. He states that he was under constant pressure from his impulses whenever he saw her. And had she had her front door locked, he would never have been able to get in there, so he kind of blames her for this.
Of course he does. Stupid piece of shit.
He would have been able to fight his impulses if that door was locked and he would have just turned and gone the other way. But I was like, I am so tired of hearing that shit of the door was unlocked, so I couldn't help myself. You sure fucking could. It wasn't your house.
She's like, every other time she'd go to leave the house, pull the door shut and be like, what is sticky all over the doorknob?
So Linda had left her door unlocked because she had just gone to do her laundry in the building laundry room, and she had just gone down there to start her wash. So while she was gone, he snuck inside and waited for her to return with a
What?
knife.
She wasn't even in the house.
I know.
Where's the logic behind that one? If he could use if the door was locked, I would have resisted my impulses. Okay, so the door was unlocked, but she wasn't fucking there.
So when she gets back, he pops out and attacks her. And I guess he had his head, like, I don't know what his big plan was, because he claims he didn't want to murder her, right? He just wanted to rape her. So he attacks her when she returns, strips her, and blindfolds her. Now, during the struggle, she throws off the blindfold and sees that it's Paul. And when Paul realizes she knows who he is, he strangles her. Now, he said he wasn't sure if she was dead, so he ran to the kitchen to grab more knives and repeatedly stabbed her. Now, he had to get several knives because several of them broke off and remained in her body. He then was still not sure if she was dead, so he dragged her to the bathroom and held her head under the water for 5 to 6 minutes just to be sure.
This is a legitimate question-ish. I don't understand the overkill process if these guys, the second they're questioned, are just going to fess up to it. She could have been left alive, because if he was just going to say, yeah, I definitely did it, it would have been a lot less time for a simple rape, which I realize that's super messed up way to look at it, versus if he murdered her.
I think he was looking at it as if she can't point him out, no one would suspect him because he had a wife, and he, up until this point, he had not raped or attacked anyone. He hasn't been arrested, like, other than a panty snatcher.
But even if he got arrested for raping her, then it's still going to be less time than if he gets caught murdering her. And let's face it, they didn't have to do much work other than somehow get his toe print, and he confessed easily.
We got less than an hour.
And since they were neighbors, that could have been easily tracked into their house or some other sort of excuse to justify it being there.
Her blood was on it.
Yeah, but it was found in her house, right?
Yeah, but how is his toe print in the Band-Aid with her blood?
So if he was over there barefoot because he borrowed something before she was murdered, it could have fallen off, and then she was murdered and her blood ended up on it. You don't know.
No.
I don't know.
So it's not the blood on it. The toe detail impression is from him stepping in the blood. Like, it's not just his Band-Aid. The outline of his little toe thing is like if you fingerprinted yourself.
But with her blood onto it. Gotcha.
Is imprinted with the blood.
Good, because I was sitting here going, I don't know how you even get a toe print off a Band-Aid. That seems awfully weird to me to begin with. But I know they can do that with duct tape or whatever. But
the whole thing, I was just thinking of I don't know. I don't play tennis, but I wonder if people do that. Maybe wear socks with your shoes. You don't have to bandage your toes. I don't know.
I wear socks with my shoes, but because I run, you done seen my feet when my socks rub weird. I get them there blisters on those arches and on my tootsies, and they don't feel too good for a week or so.
Yeah.
Wear tighter socks and tighten your shoes. I wonder if the ruse was that they hauled him in, because a ruse is like a trick, right? So if they're tricking him, they could have been like, so we got a toe print from you that matches, and then he was just like, okay, fine, I did it. And then the officers were like, oh shit, that actually worked. But I wonder if that's what the ruse was that they lied about that they were somehow able to get his toe print, and then at that point he confessed.
So they had questioned Paul and all the other neighbors, and it was only like after 7 neighbors were called, the same resident wearing Band-Aids on his toes because he would, to avoid getting blisters while he played tennis.
Mm-hmm.
Then they did the toe print ruse, and then he was arrested. So
yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe the ruse was them saying, because
but
they got a tip
it wasn't like he was in custody and then he confessed.
I think that the ruse, especially, was the word ruse used, or are you using that word?
No, that was literally published in the paper that
Okay,
after the
so
police did a ruse to get his toe print, it matched. They arrested him, and then less than an hour into that arrest, he confessed.
So a ruse is to
Trickery.
trick somebody. Yeah.
Right.
So I think when the neighbor tipped him off that, hey, this guy's got Band-Aids on his feet, they were like, the police, Paul in, and they were like, hey, so we got confirmation of this is your toe print in her blood on this Band-Aid. And then Paul was just like, well, shit. Yeah, I did. She's too purty. I had to stick my penis in her. And then the cops were like, oh shit, I can't believe telling him we got his toe print actually worked.
I don't know. I think somehow they actually did get his toe print because that's how they ended up matching it, rather than them tried to bluff him and then match it afterwards.
I'm going to say it now. They bluffed.
I don't even know if it was like when he was changing his shoes and they just made sure the floor was real sticky. So, you know what I was actually just thinking? You remember, I hate to reference movies all the time, but Hannibal, when the one dude, they pay him to wear that bracelet so the guy grabs his arm when he goes to pickpocket him and to get his fingerprints on there. That level of, I just don't know what you would do to be like, hey, can you grab me that pen? No, not with your hand.
I think they bluffed and then confirmed.
You can believe it as that way. I'm just telling you the way it's documented was that they did a toe print ruse, matched it, and then he was arrested and brought in, and then he confessed. So whatever makes you happy, regardless, the toe print matched the toe print on the Band-Aid. However the print they got it, however it matched.
If you change out the word ruse for lie, because a ruse is committing an act of deceit, so they did a toe print lie and got him to confess.
He was arrested after the toe print was a match. And he was brought in for questioning. Like, that happened. He was arrested, and then they questioned him. We're splitting hairs. Regardless, the toe print matched. His other reasoning for all of this is not really his fault, is he'd go on to tell the police further that he followed a number of girls before that he thought were pretty, but he never succeeded in getting to them to have sex with them.
What? So
I know. I was just like, okay, where's our dumbass flag? Because he deserves two.
And that definitely confirms that he was not crazy.
Yeah, because it wasn't my fault. She left the door unlocked, and I followed a bunch of other girls before they locked their doors.
I feel sorry for his wife.
Yeah,
I feel sorry for the dead Linda, too, but I feel sorry for his wife, because could you imagine finding out that Dave was arrested for murdering somebody and raping them? It's like, yeah, so what? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No,
unless he was violent towards her. If he was violent towards her and she just needed a way to escape. But these women that are like the significant others of these crazy ass killer rapist people, I couldn't imagine being in their shoes and being like, are you sure you have the right person? Being in kind of denial.
Not gonna lie, when I read that his obsession and all that, and he had followed other girls, that I was like, maybe he planned to rape her and her friend. They just were real social with him when he jumped in the back of their car. So he was like, I'll just go with it. This isn't as hard as I thought it'd be.
She was just willing to be tied up and blindfolded.
No, it's not a surprise. He's sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. He's only 24 years old.
They don't have kids, right?
No. About a year into his arrest, Linda visits Paul, where he's in the psychiatric ward of the hospital, or the psychiatric hospital, and she lets him know that she's been seeing other men while he's been in jail and wants a divorce, and she'd like to never see him again. Now,
well, at least she had the respect of going to see him instead of just having him served with the papers.
True.
I wouldn't have gone and seen his ass. I would have been like, yeah, so, and I wouldn't fess up to dating other people either. I'd just be like, yeah, so you're a piece of shit, and I want a divorce. And I'd send him the papers.
Now, he would remain obsessed with Linda for the rest of his life.
Is he still alive?
I'm not gonna answer you.
What?
Now, just 13 years after the murder of neighbor Linda, Paul is paroled in December 1985.
No.
Now, up until this point, by the way,
I thought you said he got life.
Andrew, you know what that means. Now, up until this point, Florida allowed all felons to be early released from parole, no matter the crime. It wasn't until the early 1980s that longer sentencing even became a thing. And I scratched my head real hard on that one because what the fuck? The 60s and 70s were not really that long ago for them to be confused what life in prison means or should have meant. It doesn't make any sense. If you want to sentence him to 13 fucking years for a murder, just say that. But life in prison, that should be, you are in prison your duration of your life. Your natural born life. Not, we'll give it a beat, wait till everybody's settled down, and then let you on out to see if you'll do it again.
So I think, that explains why so much craziness is like associated with Florida. Like if something crazy happens and it's like, I was in Florida.
Well, that's why
I would go there too. If I wanted to be a career criminal, I would take my happy ass to Florida as soon as I found out that no matter what, I'm going to get paroled early. And by the way, I think that's also why now life sentence comes without the possibility of parole or parole in 45 years, which by the way, my next case, that's what it is.
There's no one convincing me that life in prison means a duration of certain many years. It should mean life in prison, not with or without parole. Life in prison is life in prison. Otherwise, it's 20 to 30 years with parole.
So I think...
no.
I disagree. I'm allowed to disagree. My opinion. You can't tell me no. I think the reason they say life in prison and now stipulate the number of years before they can be possibly paroled is because they think there's a slight chance that they can be rehabilitated because they've got hoop dreams or whatever.
No.
But they leave the life on there so that they can constantly deny them parole if they're not behaving, versus if they were to say only 30 years and they serve their full time and they get out and then start committing those crimes, but they knew full and well he shouldn't be let out. But he served his time. He has to be released. At least with life hanging on in that sentencing. You can't keep saying no. That's my opinion.
I can. It doesn't make any fucking sense, Andrea. And they act like these laws just made themselves. I'm like, oh, well, that's why the way it's written in there. Because we can't monitor if you do your whole sentence. Fuck that garbage. They wrote it. Unwrite it. Add an amendment to that. Anyway.
The done ain't figured that one out.
Now, also, surprise, surprise, while he's doing his time, he falls in love with Catherine Ferguson, who worked at the prison.
Of course. Another one of these.
Mm-hmm. Now, since Paul had some college under his belt, not a college student, but actual education under his belt, he was assigned to work in an accounting office while in prison, which, by the way, I also did
I was just sitting here and about to say, wait, what? I didn't know that was an option. I thought it was like the laundry and the kitchen and...
No, I didn't know they had an accounting office in prison that you could work in, but he got that job and she was his supervisor. Now, many believe that Catherine is responsible for his early release and getting parole because they believe she coached him into knowing what to say to the parole board. And their strategy worked because he got paroled after doing 13 years. Now, obviously, that means their attraction was mutual, and when he gets paroled, they move in together with Catherine's 2 teenage daughters, and they do eventually get married. Which, by the way, when I did the whole, what the fuck, Andrea, is with these ladies bringing these predators in when they've got children in the house? I don't care how good looking she thought he was, but she has an obligation to her 2 teen daughters.
He broke in. She has access to all of that stuff. You know how they say that, like, if somebody works a lot of hours, that the likelihood of you falling for somebody that you work with. Can I just suggest to all our correctional officers that perhaps you don't take a gander at the inmates as potential future mates? Just a thought.
Now that's scraping the barrel.
Sure is. Do you know what she looks like? Like, does
I
she look
don't.
like she's lacking in some self-esteem? She needs like a boost?
I do not know what she looks like.
Because I'm curious as to why she chose a violent inmate as a significant other.
Because he looked like a beach boy.
Yes, but even if he looked like a beach boy, he raped and murdered someone.
But she got
So
lost in his eyeballs.
I don't think those are the balls she got lost in.
Maybe her husband had cheated on her, and this was her easy way of being able to keep tabs on her feller. She knew where he was every night.
Till he got released, and then she's going to unleash him to around her daughters. She has access to what his crime was. He murdered and raped his neighbor, and you're going to bring
that was her fault.
home? Okay.
She didn't lock her door.
So her daughters have to lock their bedroom doors?
I feel like it'd be for their safety if they did. Now, Paul would start beating the girls.
Oh,
Once
jeez.
so badly she ran away. And Paul would even later confess to having fantasies about one of the other girls. I feel like the one he probably wasn't beating. Now, even though he was married to Catherine, Paul would spend money on a PI to track down his ex-wife, Linda. Now, his obsession with his ex-wife and trying to locate her would ultimately sabotage his marriage with Catherine. And within
but not him
first...
beating his daughter.
I know.
Her daughter.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back for her. That was it. Him trying to track down his ex-wife. Whatever. But within the first year of their marriage, they divorce. No,
I seriously question her sanity because you don't bring the inmates home with you. I know they say sometimes people bring their work home with them. You don't bring the inmates home with you. And you definitely don't make your deciding to end a relationship not because the person is abusing your child, but because they're tracking down their ex. What?
Yeah.
That I question her sanity. Yeah.
No. Now, I don't know what happens to Linda after she divorces Paul, but Linda does eventually end up developing dementia and is confined to a nursing home. And from the time she visits Paul in prison and says she doesn't want to see him, that rings true. And those two never see each other again. So he's never successful in finding her. But I thought it was weird that the PI couldn't trace her.
Super weird. Unless
it's the 70s. So
they took his money. They're like, yeah, so you're a piece of shit. I'm completely content in just taking your money and not helping you at all.
I feel like
maybe he did find her. She spotted him and was like, huh, I'll pay you more money to tell him you didn't find me. Because is the 70s.
I feel like that's why Catherine divorced him, because it wasn't his money. He was spending her money to track down his ex-wife. But I thought it was bullshit he's over here fantasizing about one teenage daughter and beating the other.
Yeah, and that's what's going to make her divorce him, is trying to find what happened to his ex.
Yeah. Now, Paul will move to Gainesville, Florida, and would bounce from one low-paying job to the next, from pizza delivery to construction. And then what do you know? He spots a girl that looks so much like Linda to him that they could be sisters. Her name is Tiffany Sessions. She's 20 years old, and she's a student. Now, Paul quickly becomes obsessed with Tiffany and would start to stalk her. Now, because he's working construction at this point, Tiffany would walk the same route every day, directly past the building site that Paul was working at. It would be along this route that Tiffany would go missing February in 1989. Now, her body is never recovered, and no one has ever been charged with her disappearance or murder.
Oh, gosh.
So
that's so sad for her family.
Now, a cryptic clue would eventually be found in Paul's notebook that has the date that she went missing of 2/9/1989. Now, that's all that's written in there. And it's just weird that it happens to be the date she vanished. Now, police do believe that Paul had something to do with her vanishing, but have nothing else to go off of. Now, Tiffany had been wearing a golden Rolex watch when she disappeared, a watch, by the way, that she had never taken off. Or, well, not never, but hardly ever. Generally, if you saw her, she was wearing her watch. But they don't find anything of her, just so you know. So that one's, even to this day, an open case.
Oh my gosh.
And that was February, right? 89. Now, March 1992, Another Gainesville student disappears without a trace, 21-year-old Elizabeth Foster, who was from New Jersey. Now, on March 15th, 1992, she would tell her roommate that she was headed to the park to study. That's the last time anyone ever hears from her. 11 days later, her battered body is found in a wooded area across the road from the park that she liked to study at. Now, 2 months after the body's discovered, Paul decides to move to Jacksonville, Florida.
And let me guess, all the missing girls stop going missing when he leaves, and they start going missing when he moves?
Sort of, kind of. Now, the reason he moves to Jacksonville, Florida is at Christmas 1993, Paul and Catherine decide to patch things up.
Why would she let him back into her life? Like, I don't understand that.
She missed those golden locks. And
I'm convinced
she missed all those Band-Aids all around.
I'm convinced that she is lacking in the self-esteem department.
She's like, somebody needs to beat these children. Where's that fella at?
That's sad.
He gives Catherine an expensive gold Rolex watch. Which, by the way, I personally think if you marry a criminal, I realize he didn't go to jail for stealing, but I feel like if you know he's not working really high-paying jobs, it should be a red flag for a corrections officer to be given a gift that he couldn't possibly afford.
Yeah.
But so he starts packing his things to move in with Catherine when he spots a 15-year-old girl that lives in the apartment above Catherine's.
Oh my
She was
gosh.
sunbathing in a bikini behind the building, and suddenly all his old fantasies of rape and kidnapping returns. He would later tell a psychiatrist he would only think about her every now and then at first, but then it would be 3 to 4 times a day he would fantasize about her, and then that escalated into him breaking into her apartment to steal her underwear.
Yeah.
Now that's Christmas, right? Now by February, Paul goes on another one of his underwear expeditions, but is surprised when he climbs in her window because she had stayed home from school sick. Now Paul forces her to remove her clothes and proceeds to fondle and molest her for several hours.
Does he rape her? Shh.
He then tapes her hands up and covers her eyes and puts her in his car and heads to Jacksonville, which is where he's supposed to be moving from, right? Now, along the way, he stops at a Steak and Shake to get some burgers and then drove about a mile to a wooded area. There, he loosens her bonds so she can eat. Eventually, they reach Jacksonville, where Paul rapes her. The girl figured she was going to end up dead, so she tries her best to cooperate and suggests they watch some TV and rest a little bit, and then they can have some sex afterwards. Now, Paul is doing the whole, yeah, no, that's a pretty good idea. I'll go fix us some dinners. So he wanders off into the kitchen to put some TV dinners in the oven and turns on the TV. When Paul gets up to check on the dinners, the girl races to the front door, unlocks it with one hand, and uses the other to move the tire that he had used to bar the door, and runs to the neighbor's apartment for help. Paul is arrested immediately.
Good for her.
He quickly confessed to kidnapping and molesting the girl and was sentenced to 19 years for armed kidnapping and sexual battery of a minor. Since he was on parole for his prior murder conviction, his parole was revoked and he would now be spending the rest of his life in prison. Which I suppose that goes to your whole, they say, life, because if you're bad on parole, they can just throw you back in and lock the door.
Uh-huh.
I just think that if you're sentenced to life, you shouldn't be released again. I think it should be 20 to 30. But whatever.
In my opinion, I think the reason it's given a time frame is because life is very strict, and with the way the laws are currently written, if it was appealed, that their sentence would be reduced. But at least if they're given the option of parole, it can withstand the appeal, because the way it would be appealed would be, so if you're good in prison and you're good when you get out, then you're not serving a life sentence. It's on the stipulation of you have to get your shit together and behave yourself. Mm-hmm. And if not, then you get life. It's up to you. It's in your hands, fuckers.
It's because of this gal. that we should be glad there aren't any other victims, because since now he's rotting in jail, it's not going to be until February 2012 that when there's a break in, DNA screening and techniques and all that start to break cold cases. Now, that body of Elizabeth Foster that had been found in the marshy, wooded area of Gainesville in March 1992, right near where Paul was living, that DNA comes back a match to Paul, who at that point was a registered sex offender in the area at that time, so it's not a real surprise. Now, I am both happy and sad to report this one, but Paul will die of lung cancer on February 12th, 2013, in prison at the age of 64. I say happy and sad because I wish he rotted in jail a lot longer, but...
Yeah, I get it.
He left
you
behind...
like your caution cone moments.
He left behind 2 collections of photos, paperwork, and personal effects, which took 2 months to get a hold of because Paul left them to his minister friend, who did not want Paul's name besmirched, which I fucking laughed at because, really?
What?
His name besmirched after his death? Fuck you. How about that?
How about we just look at what he's in jail for? Okay?
So it took 2 months to get a hold of his belongings. Now, when they went through his belongings, that's when they find that red address book. He had made entries for the murder of Linda Fida and even the girl he kidnapped. And then that's when the officer noticed the date with a number 2 by it, which was the date Tiffany Sessions went missing. And she would have been his second victim, so the fact that date she went missing and a number 2 was by it is just weird. Now,
awfully coincidental.
Yeah, the officer that was investigating this, which I say way to go for the ones who decide to take another gander at cold cases, because the officer was able to reach out to one of Catherine's children, who confirmed that she was given a gold watch from Paul one Christmas and that she had pawned it. And as much as he tried to, he was never able to locate the watch because it did have a serial number on it. And that watch has never turned up, so whenever it got pawned, I mean, it'd be nice to know where that watch was, because that would be like the solidifying evidence of he definitely did it. Although I still say he did it, but...
Oh, yeah. He did it.
That police officer didn't even stop there. He got enough people up together that they dug up 10 acres of woods where they found Elizabeth Foster's body. They went 4 feet down. Unfortunately, they don't find anything. So, I mean, they really tried hard to find
her remains.
Yeah.
Why, can I just ask, since he was doing construction at the time, what construction site was he on? Did he manage to get her under like a slab of concrete type of situation?
That's actually interesting. I didn't see where they thought of that. It's possible. That's probably where she is.
Probably.
Now, they even went to the site near the Steak and Shake where he had taken that minor. But when they take that girl back there, she's so disturbed by even being brought back and reliving all that she couldn't recall where they went, and she just wanted to get out of there because she was just like, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. This is just, it's too much. And I don't blame her. Yeah. She went through a lot. She's lucky to live.
Yeah, that's a lot, especially for a young girl.
Oh, she's in her 30s when they go back.
Yeah.
But
what happened to her? She was a young girl, and I'm guessing because of the time period, she probably did not have any type of care for her mental health afterwards. She probably expected to just put it away and move on. She survived, but that's so sad, and I'm sorry for her. I hope she's doing better now.
I hope so too, because again, that it's thanks to her that he was put away. Otherwise, who knows how many more people he would have harmed. But again, that Tiffany Sessions case is still open, although it is believed that Paul murdered her as well. It's just unfortunate. He's dead, so they can't even bring... I mean, if he wouldn't have died, they wouldn't have found that entry in his little notebook thing. So it's
I don't know why. They can still go through their stuff.
Well,
I realize it's last priority because there's lots of other inmates, but
I feel like since he confessed before so easily,
it wouldn't have taken much.
But like, what's this date here? You did it, didn't you? And he'd be like, I did it.
Wow.
Because that's
Okay.
Paul. I'd say my Paul,
Paul's a
but
piece
I'm
of
not
shit.
claiming him.
Paul's a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it's in the name. No offense to the Pauls that are good fellers out there. It's just we got back-to-back 2 Pauls that are pieces of shit.
Dude, I thought it was crazy that I found a case that just like your one where they thought the guy was faking his death, so they dismembered him, that whole thing. What
Yeah.
the hell's with he went? I'm just glad she was dead, or I hope that Linda lady was dead when he went and got all the knives and then was breaking them off in her body.
I wonder how much of it, though, was more like rage killing because he
She
just
made him
wanted
do
it.
it.
Yeah, because he just wanted to rape her, but because she had to go and pull her the whatever off her head so that she could see him and identify him. Now he's got to go and kill her, and he wasn't prepared to do this, and rage killed.
Yeah. But then he drowned her.
Because he had to make sure. You know how many times them fellers get caught because they don't actually kill their victims? He wasn't going to let that happen. But if they came knocking on his door, he was sure going to turn over real quick and be like, yep, sure done did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, between
Stupid.
that and the whole, just like your vampire one of, if the door was unlocked, that meant I could go in.
Yeah. The logic behind these fellers.
It bothers me that there's so many people that we've read about that believe that it's not my fault. They should have locked their door or I wouldn't have gone in.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.